Here in Vermont, over half of all homicides from 1994 until now have been connected to domestic violence.
That's the leader of Steps to End Domestic Violence. The organization serves survivors in Chittenden County, operating a family shelter that's usually at capacity and working to advance awareness of intimate partner violence through outreach, education, and advocacy training. Steps just celebrated more than 50 years of service with a big gala event this spring. According to the group's annual report, Steps served more than 1,500 people last year, and just this year, it welcomed its new executive director, Lizzy Lyons.
What is amazing about the organization that I've joined is that there are many people who have done just this heavy work for a very long time. And they do this work because some of them have experiences in their own lives that has made it so that this work feels very personal. And for all of them, there's a lot of passion for making sure that this work is done well and that there's always somebody there if somebody needs that support.
You offer a wide range of services.
Yeah, we try to offer many different services that a survivor might need when they are in or exiting a relationship. And that feels really important to sort of highlight, is that we're working with people who may be in an ongoing relationship with somebody who's causing them harm. And we're also working with folks once they've exited that relationship, and we can provide services for years following that last incident of harm. And that feels really important because people can be impacted for years after exiting a relationship. And it also is important to know that there's a lot of safety and building of safety that we can do for somebody while they continue to be in a relationship with somebody who may be hurting them in different ways. Our hotline services offer some of that support in safety planning and really understanding what different situations are happening and coming up with some ideas on how to support somebody with safety in all of the unique situations that they might have.
You highlighted for me how busy the 70s were and the early 80s. That was really a time in our state where a lot of organizations, including Steps to End Domestic Violence, really got started. It tells me that something was happening in communities 50 some odd years ago. Average people really wanted to make a difference. Reflect on that.
A group of women in our community here in the Burlington area saw that there was a need. They knew that people were feeling unsafe in their relationships and didn't have the resources that they needed to find safety. And so they responded. They came together and they made those resources. They answered hotline calls. They let people stay in their own homes just to make sure that people who needed it had some place to go. And I think that's like such a Vermont response, like finding a way to help your neighbors in a time of need. These women, we would call them our founding mothers. These women have come at different marks in our history, so at the 25-year mark and now here at the 50-year mark. And they have remarked on how they had hoped that we wouldn't need these services now 50 years later, and unfortunately the need is still there. It started as Women's House of Refuge here in the Burlington area, and for 35 years it was known as Women Helping Battered Women. For the last 10, we've been Steps to End Domestic Violence, and part of that change has been the expansion of services, because we see that the need for response for violence services is not just for women. So now we serve across all gender and sexual identities to make sure that everybody has what they need to be safe. And we're really proud of the work that we're doing here in the Burlington area. And you're absolutely right, this is not just here in Burlington. This is a service that's available throughout our state. And in the country, a lot of these organizations were starting around the same time. So we're all reaching about the 50-year mark to make sure that people can have resources when they're escaping violence.
One of your peer organizations, Umbrella, which serves the Northeast Kingdom out of St. Johnsbury and Newport, they are celebrating 50 years in 2026 as well.
They are, and we have a couple of folks that are celebrating, and they've had some big galas. We just finished ours this past May, and there's a lot of different events that will be coming up in October for Domestic Violence Awareness Month as well. And we really rely on our community to support the work that we're doing and making sure that in most organizations, including ours here at Steps, volunteers from the community are really how we deliver services and make sure that people are answering the call when it's needed.
I wanted to ask you about housing. We hear about Vermont's housing crisis all the time. It's usually presented as an economic development challenge or a workforce development challenge, but I wonder if it's also a safety crisis, because I imagine that you probably hear from survivors all the time who are struggling to even imagine leaving their home because they might not have a new home to go to.
Yes, so 1 in 8 folks will say that domestic violence is the reason that they left their housing. And with our housing crisis, we're seeing more and more folks facing periods of homelessness because they're just not able to access any alternatives in our community to stay local and stay close by to family and friends. We are looking at the ways that housing also is impacting people by experiences of financial abuse. And so oftentimes there can be limited resources because one partner is controlling the money, and or if one partner is controlling payment of rent, like they may not pay landlords, and that could really impact somebody's housing history, preventing them from having housing in the future. So there's a lot of barriers facing folks as they're trying to figure out how to move from a abusive relationship into a more stable future. And housing is a big part of that. It also impacts families differently because when you're a parent who is trying to flee a relationship where violence is present, and you want to maintain consistency for your kids in a school district, that can be really challenging to stay in a community if housing is not available.
Talk more about kids. Even if children aren't being physically harmed in a domestic violence situation, they are certainly being harmed in a multitude of ways if they are aware of violence going on under their own roof. What work is being done to help them?
Yeah, I actually was most recently in a role in our statewide coalition, the Vermont Network, supporting youth advocates across the state. Steps has a great program here in the Burlington area to support young people. But what we see is when there's abuse in the home, kids will have awareness. We often say that kids know their parents better than anybody else, the adults in their life. So oftentimes, even if a kid isn't present, although sometimes they are present in situations of violence, but even if they're not present, there's still a lot of impact on kids. It can really stress their nervous systems, and it can have impacts in a lot of different ways. And we'll see situations where kids are not attending school regularly because it's not feeling safe to them to leave a parent at home and they want to stay close to a parent. So our advocates will work with schools, they'll work with medical providers. If a parent has identified these as things that they need advocacy support around, we would do that. The big part of our work, though, is centered on empowerment. The empowerment model is kind of foundational to all the work that we at Steps do and across the state for domestic and sexual violence work. And that just means that we only do what a survivor or somebody who experienced that violence would ask us to do. We're not doing something without their permission, because when you have been in a relationship where power and control was removed, then our primary goal is to make sure that that survivor, that person, experiences that power and control. They get to decide what they need and how they need it. And so that's where we support that piece.
And they know what's safest for themselves.
Absolutely. There's a lot of nuance that goes into relationships of violence that an outside perspective or an outside person just has no understanding of really the complexity that is happening for somebody. And so that's where we really have to take others lead and make sure that they have the support that they need when they need it. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 8 men have had a situation of violence that has impacted them in their lifetime. And those numbers are just staggering. There's so many people in our circles who have had these experiences. So making sure that we show up is not just something that we do in this profession, it's something that we do in communities.
Well, thank you so much for the work that you do.
Yeah, of course.
Steps to End Domestic Violence, again, serves survivors of intimate partner violence, specifically in Chittenden County. Interpretation services are available if a hotline caller does not speak English. People in Vermont's other counties can access the free statewide domestic violence hotline at the number you see there on your screen. And the Vermont Network can point you to organizations providing help throughout the state. Look for the red Get Help button at the top of vtnetwork.org. And in Northern New York, Behavioral Health Services North offers the Stop Domestic and Sexual Violence program for Clinton, Franklin, and Essex counties. There's a 24/7 hotline for crisis support, and help is also available with housing, safety planning, transportation, legal advocacy, and more.